Hello students, welcome to Unacademy platform. In this platform you have live classes, then there are structured courses, there are live test quizzes, and you have unlimited access on subscription. You can also download this Unacademy learning app. Okay, and all those things that I just told you about are also available in this very app. This is about me, and this is my Telegram link. So you can ask any doubt, any question that you have while watching my lectures. I am going to respond them. Okay, I will make sure that your doubt is resolved. This is my Unacademy profile link. So along with me, these are other top educators, and they're in YouTube and other platforms of Unacademy. These are different subscription plans available. You can go with Plus, and hello students, welcome to Unacademy platform. There you will get live classes, test series, unlimited practice, and structured schedule. If you go with Iconic, you get this personal coach, daily means question answer practice, study planner, personalized feedback. Okay, and these are the plans, different plans of different durations. You can select according to your requirement, and if you apply this very code, all these plans are available at 10% discount. Okay, apply this very code to avail 10% discount. So these are again the different plans to subscribe, and these are available at 10% discount if you apply this very code, that is Amit PS. These are different optional subjects which are available on the platform, and I'm going to take PSIR. Again, these are different plans for different durations, and all these plans are available at 10% discount if you use the code AmitPS. Okay, now we are going to start the lecture, and here we will continue with our discussion on Locke. So we have seen about the perspective of the thinker, and there we saw that how he is going to ensure, or how he's going to make sure that the perspective he is going to adopt is although similar to Hobbes, but he is going to build on something which has been created by, or which has been created by Hobbes precisely, and there is also a history of political thought which goes back to Machiavelli, and it is actually the journey from Machiavelli to Hobbes which is going to be reflected in the theory of Locke. So I was having this discussion, and there I will again come out with this very comparative analysis of Machiavelli, Hobbes, and Locke. Comparative in the sense that we will be able to see that how the very formation of theory, which is related to secularization of politics, the autonomous nature of politics, the emergence of centralized sovereign state that is started, or that is present in the very nascent form in political theory of Machiavelli, is taking a proper shape in Hobbes, is going to be again decorated with so many modern features of governance by Locke that it is almost complete, or it brings a kind of conclusive chapter to the development that are coming, or that started with Machiavelli, leading to a stage where we can see that actually the first modern system of governance, or modern form of the government, is very much reflected in theories of Locke. So all that is visible here. Okay. So here we are going to start again. I showed you that Hobbesian sovereign is the basis of the idea of impersonal or representative government. Okay, and this is something that I explained in my last video. Getting it? And he transformed princely rule into an office. That is something you realize in my last explanation. Princely rule means what? Princely rule of Machiavelli. So Machiavelli actually comes out with a princely rule who is not going to be dictated by religion, and that is why it is being said by Dunning also that he brings politics away from the vassalage of religion. Okay, so he is coming out with a theory which brings politics out of the domination of religion. But that princely state is going to be converted into office by Hobbes. Okay, and now that office is still going to be decorated by Locke, and we will see that kind of thing happening here. In this very office, for Hobbes, which is the result of social contract or covenant, the sovereign is responsible to the agents who have created the contract for their preservation. Okay, Hobbes proposed the doctrine of secular absolutism. Doctrine of secular absolutism. Okay, proposed the doctrine of secular absolutism. One that invests sovereign with the absolute power to ensure the rule of law. Yes, this is something which you have seen in Hobbes. Now, you will see that law, justice, and stability, and out of these rather harsh and formidable premises. So, what is so harsh and formidable in Hobbes? What is so harsh and formidable in Hobbes? It is the very nature of the sovereign that is getting created out of or from the contract. So, what is specific nature is being pointed here or is being indicated here? This is his absolutist character. Okay, absolutist character. So that is being referred as harsh. Okay, harsh and formidable. Now Locke is going to create more liberal constitutional theory of a state while being still in many ways very dependent on the premises that Hobbes and again by modifying Machiavelli has taken. So Machiavelli, I told you, is being modified by Hobbes. When Hobbes is going to make this very princely rule going to convert into office of sovereign. But still that office of sovereign is very harsh and formidable because of its absolutist character. Okay, but now what will happen? This harsh and formidable office or the terms of Hobbes is going to be still modified by Locke, where he is coming out with his liberal constitutional theory of a state, putting various limitations on the power and the extent of the government. And that is why I said that here you see the genesis, or you can see that the final chapter, almost the final chapter has been written so far as the modern system of government is concerned. Okay, so modern system of government is a government whose powers are limited. You must have heard or you must have read about basic NCRTs where one of the purpose to bring or to frame the constitution, a constitution which is completely legitimate, is to limit the power of the government. Okay, limit the power of the government. This is the most basic knowledge you will have about constitution of our government. Actually, this is also the essence of constitutionalism, and all these finds its first theorization in the writings of Locke. Okay, now see, Locke sets out a process of domestication. Okay, domestication of what? Of the same uh, office. Okay, which had harsh and formidable characters. He sets out to tame Hobbesian fierce and harsh theory of absolute government, which has found few defenders in his own day. Yeah, so that was the case with Hobbes. We have seen that how he was criticized by Republicans, by monarchy, by church, by almost every section of his scholars and intelligentsia. Okay, because everyone found some reason, some lack in his theory. Okay, but the success of Hobbes lies in actually making that very continent habitable, which was created by Machiavelli. And that very continent is actually the autonomous nature of politics. Okay, a secular sphere of politics. I hope you are getting all that. You will be able to understand every single word here if you are following the series. Okay, Locke's, Locke's first treatise is a response to Filmer's philosophy. Okay, now we are going to see Filmer. What Filmer has to say. Yeah, why Filmer is being opposed by, by Locke. Filmer has written a book, Patriarcha. Okay, Filmer has written a book, Patriarcha. In Patriarcha, he argued that all political authority derives from the grant of authority that God has given to Adam, and therefore all legitimate authority has divine right behind it. See what he is saying. He is saying that all political authority. So, political authority here means state, rulers, okay, uh, leaders, even the democratic leaders having the support of masses, all political authority derives from the grant of authority that God has given to Adam. So, authority that they are going to have is actually coming from Adam, okay, who got it from God. So, it is not actually the authority from below, but it is the authority from above. And in that sense, Wilmer, through this very theorization, is actually defending the divine right theory. Okay. And we have seen the dismantling of this very theory in our discussion on Hobbes. Okay, so now Locke is someone who is going to build on the, on the theory of Hobbes, and Hobbes himself has destroyed and dismantled this very divine right theory, okay, in his own theory of sovereignty, and also in his description of the state of nature leading to the formation of sovereign. Okay, now this is the reason why he is going to attract or invite vehement criticism from Locke, and this is the reason why Filmer is being attacked. I would not say criticized, attacked by Locke. Filmer criticized social contractarians' claim that man is born free. So this is actually the claim of social contractarians, because in as you have seen in case of Hobbes' state of nature, okay, men are actually born free only. Now there is no imposition of God's will over men, okay, that is there in state of nature. There are other problems and other issues in state of nature which need immediate resolution, okay, or which demand immediate care or immediate attention. Okay, God's will is not one among them. Okay, so there is no will, there is no mention of God in the theorization or in the picture that Hobbes presents about the state of nature. And similar is the view of other social contractors. Actually, the essence of this very social contract theory is this, that whatever be the form of government, that will depend, that will differ from thinker to thinker in social contract tradition. But the essence is this, that the form of government or the institution of state that is emerging here is actually the result of the individuals making a contract among themselves, okay, and giving rise to different political structure or institutions. The significance here is this, that the legitimacy of that very institution, the political institution, the political structure, is actually coming from within. Okay, it is a legitimacy from below. And in the previous lectures also, I have told you that legitimacy is always going to be from below only. It is the authority it is the authoritarian tendency which is imposed from above. But when it comes to legitimacy, which is the feature of authority, it must emerge from within and it must come from below. So the institution in social contract tradition, which gets created out of the contract, derives its legitimacy from below. Okay, where individuals are concurring or they are agreeing to certain set of conditions, and they finally together create a state or government or any political structure for their governance. So, in social contractarians, you will find a belief or a claim that man is born free. Okay, and now Filmer is going to deny that. So Filmer is actually proposing something which stands against the whole community of social contractarians. Okay, so according to Filmer, man is not born free, and moreover, imposition of contract isn't justified on everyone. See the irony in the theory of Filmer. He is not agreeing to social contractarians' claim that man is born free. First, second, he is having problem that it might be a case that all the individuals, or if you consider from historical point of view, that even if all the individuals agreed or concurred to the signing of this very argument, this very contract, giving rise to the institution of the state, according to Filmer, it is not justified that that contract which was signed, if we take it literally in very historical sense, it is not justified according to Filmer to impose it on those who were not party to the contract at that very moment. But Filmer does not have any problem in bequeathing this very burden of Adam to every man at present time. So he is having problem when that social contract which was agreed to by the individuals is being followed willingly by other individuals. But he does not have problem when everyone has to bear this burden of God or the authority of God without any basis. Okay, so Filmer is asking us to accept this very burden of the authority of God which was given to Adam. But Filmer is not ready to accept that those who were not party or might not have been present when social contract was being signed should actually accept the institution of a state which is the result of the social contract. So this shows a kind of hypocrisy, a dichotomy, a very stark discrepancy in his theory. But that is not why we are going to criticize him. Okay, so Locke again is going to be very methodical. Okay, so he is going to be very methodical in his attack over Filmer, and that is something that you are going to see here. Okay, so if you got Filmer's idea, he further says that Filmer, instead of considering contract to be the basis of authority, believes that heredity should be the basis of authority and rule. See, Now he is completely exposed at this very moment when he says that heredity should be the basis of authority and rule. Okay, so it is not the contract which should be the basis of authority, it is the heredity. Okay, in second treatise, Locke sets out to give his more positive theory of government. Okay, in this book, Locke provides his theory of parliamentary sovereignty, rule of law, separation of power, and constitutional government, all that we are going to see. Now, theory of natural law and social contract. There is no modern thinker who makes natural law as important to his doctrine as does Locke. Because if you recall Hobbes, he also accepts the existence of natural law, but every time when he's taking consideration of natural law, ultimately it turns out that they become meaningless, okay, because of different situations in different conditions. So we have seen natural law losing significance in Hobbes' theory. There is no modern thinker who makes natural law as important to his doctrine as does Locke. The state of nature for Locke is, as in many ways for Hobbes, isn't a condition for ruling and being ruled, as it was for Aristotle. So if you recall Aristotle, man's all material needs are going to be fulfilled only under a state. Okay, so in that sense, what Aristotle seems to be conveying is that institution of a state is important. Not only that, before the formation or emergence of a state, man's life is incomplete. Okay, now this was true for Hobbes also, but Hobbes is differing, or Hobbes is going to be making criticism of Aristotle, or he seems to be making a criticism of Aristotle, because for Aristotle, if you recall our discussion, it was a question of good and bad life. So people came under the institution of a state in order to attain good life, because before the emergence of this very state as an institution, their life was not complete, and that was not good. But for Hobbes, you have seen that it is not a question of good life or bad life, it is a question of life and death itself. Okay, so state is created, that is the sovereign is created in Hobbes. Okay, the foremost intention or purpose being self-preservation. Okay, now state of nature for Locke, as in many ways for Hobbes, isn't a condition for ruling and being ruled. Now the state of nature, as you find in a scheme of Locke, he seems to start, or he actually starts with a very good picture. Okay, picture of a state of nature, but then he builds on that very premise, concluding that even then it is not habitable. We will see how that is happening. So in that very premise, whether state of nature, this is something before the condition before emergence of a state or formation of society. So in state of nature, in Aristotle, although Aristotle does not use the word state of nature, so don't get confused here. Okay, so in Aristotle's case, state of nature would mean all the history of all human history before the emergence of state. And in Hobbes, you already know what is the state of nature, and Locke is also coming from the same tradition that Hobbes belongs to, and that is why he also is going to theorize in detail on the state of nature that we are going to see in a few minutes. So don't get confused that I did not use the word state of nature here in uh, in Aristotle. Okay, now see that state of nature isn't a political condition. Okay, it is not a political condition. Locke describes a state of nature as a state of perfect freedom. Okay, Locke describes a state of nature as a state of perfect freedom. Although in Hobbes' state of nature also people were free. Okay, Aristotle said we were by nature a member of political community, that is polis, a moral community of some kind, bound by ties of civic or family obligations. This you have seen when we were discussing the features of polis. Okay, and when we were explaining his statement that man is a political animal. Okay, now Locke, on the contrary, understood the state of nature as a condition without a civic authority and civic obligations. Okay, so state of nature in Locke's scheme is a condition which where you do not find any civic authority or where you do not find any reason whereby people are going to oblige, okay, by law or by any authority, because there is absence of any civic authority. The state of nature isn't a moral condition, okay, as it was for Hobbes. It isn't simply a condition of war of all against all. So you have seen that Hobbes presents a very gloomy picture of a state of nature where things are actually turning out uh, in such a way that the life of individual becomes solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. But in Locke's account, the state of nature is not a immoral condition. Okay, the state of nature is actually a moral condition. In Locke's theory, the state of nature is actually a moral condition governed by moral law. Okay, moral condition is actually a moral law. Now, what is moral law? Moral law is actually the natural law that dictates the peace and social stability. Now, natural law, I told you, is based on reason. Okay, so as you have seen in case of Hobbes, that although he concedes that men are slaves of passion, but he also makes a point that those very men are also endowed with this very quality of reason. And if you recall in our discussion, that this very reason became the cause that why they were ready to select self-preservation instead of mutually assured destruction in state of nature, and went to form an agreement or a contract giving rise to the institution of sovereign. Okay, so in Locke's account also you see a belief or a perception that supports the existence of natural law. But here, this very natural law is going to have wider manifestations in Locke's theory, where you will see that this actually becomes the major point of emphasis in his theory. Okay, we will see that. So, moral law is actually the natural law that dictates peace and social stability. There is a moral law of nature that no one should harm another in his life, liberty, and possessions. That is life, liberty, and possessions. Now, see, according to Locke, natural law, that is the law of reason, declares that we are all the workmanship of one omnipotent and infinite wise maker, and as a product of divine workmanship, we are never to harm one another in our life, liberty, and position. Okay, so there is a belief of God here in Locke. Okay, and it is not just about natural law, it is also about sharing this very premise or sharing this very bond that we are all the workmanship of one omnipotent Almighty. Okay, Locke, unlike Hobbes, takes the enlightened view of human nature and self-interest, and that is going to make this very debate or this very discussion more interesting. That it was easy for Hobbes to justify the reason why people are going to come to an agreement to form a contract which, where they are going to actually transfer their natural rights, okay, collectively to another body. Okay, but Locke, when he is providing the picture of state of nature, he is projecting an enlightened view of human nature as against as against we have seen in case of Hobbes, where he shared a very negative perception about human nature. Okay, so now it is going to be interesting to see that what becomes the basis or what becomes the reason in Locke's theory which necessitated the formation and the signing of contract, ultimately giving rise to government. Three natural rights of life. These natural rights of life, liberty, and property derive their significance from the fact that being a part of natural law, they are God's reason. Okay, and hence the declaration of omnipotent. Oh, see, although you are actually able to witness a great deal of God and other worldliness here, but believe me, this is not going to the basis of argument, or this is not going to the premise which becomes the foundation of his argument that why these very rights are going to be important and preserved. Okay, so just try to understand the argument here is that the natural rights of life, liberty, and property derive their significance because of the fact that being a part of natural law, they are God's reason. So natural law is based on reason, and reason is actually significant only because it is connected to God's reason. Okay, God's reason. So that is why it existed from the beginning of the time, and that is why natural law does not require any kind of outer authority for its acknowledgement or its acceptance, or it does not require any authority to legitimize its existence because it is based on reason, and reason is connected to the God's reason. These rights are inalienable. Which rights? These natural rights of life, liberty, and property are inalienable. They cannot be taken away from individuals, and inviolable. They cannot be violated because they are derived from the law of nature, which is God's reason. So law of nature, that is natural law, is actually based on reason, and this reason is actually connected to the God's reason. Now see, everyone is bound by reason not only to preserve oneself but to preserve all mankind. So it is not just about one mankind that becomes the reason why one should, or one's theorization is based on natural law, but it is actually the concern for the preservation of mankind as a whole. In the state of nature, men are free and equal, and there is no superior authority to whom they are obliged to obey. Okay, everybody is the judge of his own actions. Now, here is the starting of this very argument, which will lead to a proposition which necessitates the formation or the formation of and signing of the contract, giving rise to the government. So please pay full attention. In the state of nature, men are free and equal, and there is no superior authority to whom they are obliged to obey. So the problem here is that men are free. First is this, and they are equal. Second premise is this. The problem here is this, that there is no superior authority to whom they are obliged to obey. So as was told earlier, that in states of nature of Locke, there is no civic authority and no civic obligations because there is no superior authority to whom people are obliged to obey. Everybody is the judge of his own actions. So in a state of nature that is to be found in Locke's account, things are actually good. They are going good because everyone is actually working according to the God's reason, and that is again a security, or that is again something which will indicate that it is a situation where natural law prevails. Okay, and especially the natural law of life, liberty, and property. But the problem is that people are not obliged by any authority, and that is why everyone is going to interpret the natural law, okay, on the basis of his own understanding. Now, because there will is no judge, everyone is going to consider his own version or his own explanation or his own interpretation of natural law to be correct. Now, because these interpretations are going to be different or likely to be different, that will become the cause of conflict. Okay. So, although the natural condition in the state of nature is state of liberty, it is not a state of license to anything. Okay, and everything. Nobody has the right to destroy himself or the life of any other person. So, a state of liberty in a state of nature does not mean an all-out unrestricted freedom. Okay, so the very presence of natural law, which is based on reason, and through that link is connected to the God's reason, ensures that this very state of freedom is not any state of license to do anything and everything. So it is not, no one is within his right to inflict harm to anyone's life, okay, or position. So what is the problem in the state of nature? Everything seems to be fine. The problem in the state of nature emerges because laws require reason to be interpreted. Okay, laws require reason to be interpreted, and men interpret it differently. So men are going to interpret these very reasons, these very laws differently. There is no common just to punish the violation of natural law. So first problem is that natural laws, although they exist in state of nature, okay, they are not meaningless in a state of nature, as was the case with Hobbes. But the problem is that because natural law or law of nature require reason for their interpretation, the interpretation of different people is going to be different, becoming the cause of conflict. Secondly, if anyone violates natural law, if in case anyone violates natural law, there is no mechanism for the rectificatory justice there. Means there is no one to punish the violation of natural law. Okay. Each individual is his own judge and has the executive power of punishing the violators of law of nature. But when men are judges in their own cases, they can't be impartial. Yes or no? See this argument? So everyone, in the absence of any civic authority, where all the people are to be abolished by, each individual is going to be the judge in his own case. So if there would be differing interpretation of natural law, then those parties involved in that very conflict are going to claim their own version of interpretation to be more correct than the other one. And this definitely is going to give rise to the conflict. Yes or no? This is very easy to understand. Because there is no judge here, the only judge you find in that very setting is the individual himself. And when individuals become judges in their own cases, impartiality, objectivity can't be expected of them. Okay. So the problem which arise in the state of nature can be enumerated as follows. So these are the problems. First, law of nature wasn't clear and different interpretations prevailed. Okay, law of nature was not clear and different interpretations prevailed because natural law require reason for their interpretation. Okay, no impartial judge to interpret the law. That again is a problem. Then no common and competent authority to enforce the law. Okay, so it is the problem of first interpretation of law. Second, second is the competent authority who is going to enforce those laws or maybe that those laws are violated, then to make sure that violators are punished. Okay, this was the reason that when a dispute started, it could not come to any conclusion. Okay, it is when the dispute starts in a state of nature, it is not going to come to an end because the warring parties, conflicting parties here, will have their own interpretation of natural law and will consider their respective positions to be correct. This became the basis of contract, okay, in Locke's theory. Okay, so when that dispute started, it is not going to end. This compelled man to create civil society and the state to remove the inconveniences. So, what led the men to go for civil society? It was these set of problems. First, law of nature wasn't clear and different interpretations prevailed. Okay, no impartial just to interpret the law. Third, no common and competent authority to enforce the law. Okay, so now you come to know that what becomes the basis of contract in Locke's theory, even when he presents a very good picture of human nature and gives rise to a very a kind of uh, gives rise to a situation which is, I'm sorry, is giving rise to a situation which is going to necessitate the signing of the contract and giving rise to the formation of government. Now we are going to see in detail the social contract that takes place in Locke's theory. Okay, now understand. In Hobbes, there is one contract by which both civil society and state is created. Okay, you have seen that happening in Hobbes. But in Locke's theory, there are two stages of formation of government and then state. Okay, we are going to see that in detail now. The problem of Locke is the formation of civil society by common consent. Okay, that is that is the first problem. Okay, so that is the first stage of contract here. The problem of Locke is the formation of civil society by consent. Now see that men, as has been said, are free. So men are free in Locke's account. They are also equal and independent by nature. But no one can be put out of this very state of nature and subject to any other power or organization without his own consent. Okay, so what is the problem here? The problem here is with regard to the common consent. So this is particularly becoming the first challenge in Locke's account for the formation of civil society. Okay, so how that common consent is to be found? Men, after giving their consent, agree to form a civil society or political community. So first consent is there, which is leading to the formation of civil society, that is also called political community. Okay, political community. Then comes the stage of transferring their right of punishing the violators of natural law to an independent and impartial authority. Okay, so first consent is going to give rise to civil society. So the first problem resolved. Okay, when men consented to form a civil society, that is a political committee. But now this political committee is going to decide, okay, decide about the transferring of their right of punishing the violators of natural law to an independent and impartial authority. Okay. Now all men are unanimously agree to incorporate themselves in one body and conduct their affairs by the opinion of the majority. Okay. This is political or civil society. So when all individuals unanimously agree to incorporate themselves in one body and conduct their affairs by opinion of the majority, this is actually a political committee. So this is the first stage of that very contract. Okay, when all men unanimously agree to incorporate and create a single body, which is going to be the political community here. Okay, now why this is happening? So that that particular body is going to be the result of common consent. Okay, so the civil society or the political community in Locke's account is the result of common consent, and all men have agreed to it. Okay, and now all men are actually going to agree to another proposition, that is conduct their affairs by the opinion of the majority. Now when the formation of political community has taken place, then how things are going to be decided, or the decision regarding the future of course of action, how that is going to be taken. Here they have agreed to work on the basis of the opinion of majority. Okay, this is political or civil society which is going to work or decide the future course of action, where everyone has agreed to work or to accept the opinion of majority. After they have set up civil society, the next step is to appoint a government or legislative to declare and execute law. Okay, so it is the political community which is going to decide, which is going to appoint a government or legislature for adjudication as well as the execution of law. Okay, and this, he says, is the supreme authority established by Commonwealth or civil society. So Commonwealth and civil society has already been created, and that was created even before the formation of the government. Understand here the implication of it. So it is the free civil society which came into being through first stage of common consent that is emerging there, and that now that political community or civil society is going to accord the importance to the, or is going to appoint a government or legislature which is going to execute law or adjudicate law. This, according to Locke, is the supreme authority established by Commonwealth or civil society. Okay, in Locke's political philosophy, there are two separate acts. Okay, one which gives rise to civil society, and the other which creates the government. So the government here is not being directly created by individuals by any contract in a state of nature itself, as you have seen in Hobbes. No, this is not the case here. So the situation here is this, that the first stage, where uh, all people are going to create or going to provide their consent in order to create a civil society that becomes also a political community. So that is the first stage here. Now this very political community or civil society is going to create the government. So government is the creation of political or civil society. Okay, so the emergence of government here is again going to be even more legitimate than the one that we have seen in other thinkers, because here a kind of political community has emerged in order to give rise to the institution of government. Okay, that was not the case in Hobbes or in other thinkers. Now it is like saying that if a constitution is made without a constituent assembly, that might not be enjoying that kind of legitimacy. But if in first stage a proper well represented constituent assembly is made, and if that constituent assembly is going to come out with very constitution, that constitution is going to be understood as more legitimate. So here a political community which has come into being after the unanimous consent of the people there, if this committee is going to give rise to the government, then it again is going to be even more reliable. Okay, or that is what it is expected from it. The first is the product of the contract. What first? The very formation of civil society or political community. This is the product of the contract. And the second is only a fiduciary power to act for certain ends. And second is only a power which is being given on faith, okay, to act for certain purposes. So the government is not being created out of any contract here. So the power which is being transferred to the government is on the basis of trust rather than any agreement. Okay. Now see, the first is the product of contract and second is only a fiduciary power to act for the certain ends. And there remains still in the people a supreme power to remove or alter the legislature when they find the legislative act contrary to the trust reposed in them. Okay. Now, as I said, that the creation of government in Locke is not the result of any contract. Okay. So why is called social contractarian? Because again, although his social contract is not his social contract is not giving rise to the government, but it is giving rise to a political community which again facilitates the formation of government. Okay, and that government is actually the result of the faith that has been put on it by the political community, okay, which emerged out of the contract or agreement. Okay, so that is why it is being said that it is only a fiduciary power to act for certain ends, and there remains still in people a supreme power to remove or alter the legislature when they find the legislative act contrary to the trust reposed in them. So the power here, unlike Hobbes, is going to rest with people again in order to make sure that the legislature does not do anything contrary to their trust. Okay, so government for Locke is after all a trustee. So government according to Locke is trustee. The fundamental principle of Locke's theory of political obligation is consent. Okay, so everything is being based on consent here. Getting it? Everything is being based on consent here. The fundamental principle of Locke's theory of political obligation is consent. In his theory, there is no two kind of consent. Now understand this. The formation of political community is actually the key development in his theory, because the installation of government is going to be conducted is going to be done by the this very political community only. Okay, now so far as the consent, which is the very basis of Locke's theory, is concerned, we are going to see that how that consent is expressed, okay, in real sense. So here he says that there are two kinds of consent. The first is express consent, that is clear consent, okay, and the second is tacit consent. Consent means silent consent by one's action. Consent is assumed because no objections are made. So there is a class of citizens who are going to actively voice their consent. Okay, or will provide it in writing. Others who are not that active, if they are not making any objection to it, their silent consent is going to be taken into account. Okay, consent is assumed because no objections are made. If objections are made, then it is a question to consent. But if no objections are made, then that becomes uh, I'm sorry. If tacit consent, if no objections are made, then that becomes a tacit consent. It would be understood that a man has provided his consent if he has not objected. Express consent was an explicit commitment given at the time when Commonwealth was created. Okay, so when Commonwealth was created, we actually in the Aristotle scheme it is clear that express consent was actually required. Tacit consent in Locke's idea is that by living or existing in the area that is controlled by the government, one is giving one's tacit consent and is bound by its law and judicial policies. Okay, now if one has not provided express consent, but in any particular territory, but he is living or exercising the area that is controlled by the government, okay, he is living or existing in that area which is controlled by the government, it will be considered or it will be assumed that the individual has given his tacit consent. Getting it? Now see that you must be clear about these two kinds of consent here. Okay. Government in Locke's contract is limited by various factors. Okay. So what are those factors? We will see here. According to Barker, this trust theory in Locke's account of social contract has great technical implications. It makes the community beneficiary without having any duties towards the trustee, that is the government. Okay, so if any contract is found or if any contract is made between this political community and those who are going to be in the government or any other political authority, then contract would also demand some conditions from people also or from that political community also. But government here is not the product of the contract. Here government is actually the product of the faith that has been put on it by political community. And here Barker is saying that this particular thing or this particular account is actually going to have great technical implications. What are technical implications here? That community, it makes the community beneficiary without having any duties towards the trustee, that is government. If government is the creation of trust, that means the political committee which is bestowing that very trust to the institution does not have any obligations to does not have any duties towards that particular government. If you recall Hobbesian idea of a state of nature and the formation of sovereign there, that in that very contract a lot of points were there which were actually in form of duties towards that particular government, okay, that particular sovereign. Now see, Locke provides legislative for making laws, which is the supreme authority. So in Locke's account, which is going to be the supreme authority? It is the legislature. So legislature is the supreme authority in Locke. Okay, why? Because it is providing or it is making laws. Okay. Now understand further. Besides legislature, Locke mentions two other powers, that is first executive and second is federative. So there are three kinds of power in Locke's theory. What are these three kinds of power? First is the legislature, the body of legislatures. Second is executive power, and third is federative power. Now, federative power is actually a power which is related to foreign policy or foreign affairs. Okay, so the federative power of the government is concerned with what we now call foreign affairs. Okay, so what Montesquieu later on called the judicial power, it is this very person, okay, legal philosopher, who came out with this very theory of separation of power. So what Montesquieu later on called the judicial power is included in the executive power. Okay, in Locke's theory, executive power is the subordinate to the legislature and is responsible to it. Okay, now we are going to see the limitations of the government in the next part of the lecture. This was all about this very video. If you go for any kind of subscription, you can use this very code to avail 10% discount.